Well, today, the world of sport and business crashed together with a merger of two of the most bitter of enemies, the PGA Tour of America and its nemesis, LIV Golf, headed by Greg Norman. The vitriol has been dripping for a year after LIV took the cream of PGA's golfers, including Phil Mickelson, Brooke Koepka and Cameron Smith, with payments in some cases of hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, now the Saudi-backed LIV will merge with the PGA. So how will that work and what does that mean for golf here in Australia? I'm joined by Fox Sports News' Jim Callan. Jim, always good to have a chat to you about this. All right, so tell me, what were the forces that brought these two most bitter of enemies finally together?
Well, holistically, the messaging from the PGA Commissioner, Jay Monahan, is a unified game once again. Dig a little deeper, and it's safe to say it just comes down to who has the deeper pockets, because it's cost an extraordinary amount of money to get to this situation on both sides of the camps, but there is the ongoing threat of litigation. We don't know how costly that can be, and the threat of that hanging over the PGA, given the cost it's already had on their deep pockets, doesn't stretch as far as the Saudi-backed investment fund. So I think they had to come broker a deal, and the fact they've actually done it in the background for 7 weeks is no small miracle, in part to keep that secret, but it led to today the shock announcement, which we never saw coming, but we can sort of understand.
OK, but a few miracles here. Number one is that they kept Greg Norman away from this for 7 weeks. The deal was not done with the boss of LIV Golf involved at all with Jay Monahan.
Yeah, well, there's only 3 PGA people involved in this. We're not quite sure how many on the other side. You'd have to say probably about the same. So, yes, it was very much under the cloak of darkness that this had to be done. I think you had to do that. You had to remove some of those who were right at the front line of this. Greg Norman on one side, Rory McIlroy, perhaps Tiger Woods even to a certain degree on the other, were very much kept out of this, and I think with good reason, because perhaps cool heads prevail and they've managed to broker a peace deal where both seemingly have come out of it looking okay.
But it looks as though Saudi Arabia, its business effectively now has a stake of golf around the world, including in the most prestigious of those markets, which is the United States.
So in the end, what the PGA Tour was vehemently fighting against for the better part of 2 years, they've now teamed up with. The irony is not lost on many people, particularly those who have stayed loyal to the PGA Tour. There are many golfers right now in Canada about to tee up in the Canadian Open. They've had meetings, and I'm told by some insiders, 90% of whom at a snap meeting, when they were asked about should there be a change of leadership, stood and cheered. So that's the position at the moment and the reaction of some of those players in what they think about the leadership of the PGA at the moment and this deal that no one saw coming.
And the reason for that is because if you take someone like a Cameron Smith, who's reported to have been paid $150 million to go to LIV, or say Phil Mickelson, $250 million to go to LIV, and if you're, say, Jordan Spieth or Rory McIlroy, you stayed true, you didn't get that money. Now what happens?
Yeah, or Hideki Matsuyama, he was offered hundreds of millions of dollars, the famous Japanese player. Exactly. They're asking the very same question right now. What was the price of my loyalty if you're going to allow these players who haven't even been suspended in Cameron Smith's situation for a full year? It was after the Open of last year before he defected and then was subsequently suspended. And now it's seemingly there's a pathway back where they can all come together. I think there's a long way to play out on this year.
OK, so is the reality that the PGA Tour of America saw this is the only way to get these great players back? Brooke Koepka having competed and almost won the Masters, and then coming a few weeks later and having won the PGA, one of the grand tours of golf. So is this a part of the reasoning, you think?
It's a good question. It may have helped spark some thought on this, to be honest. I think if they wanted to keep a genuine seat at the table of how the game of golf was governed in the world, they had to broker a deal now. Otherwise, their financial backing would be chipped away further. Their ability to broker a peace deal, well, they are still very much front and centre of it, and Jay Monahan is. Yeah. He's now effectively the chairman of world golf, if you like, but it's been driven by the cash of the Saudi-backed public investment scheme, of which they had been opposed of for a long time. OK,
final one for you, and that is Australian golf. It's been literally withering on the vine with a lack of sponsorship, largely because the PGA Tour created an autumn wraparound season that has not been successful, but it's taken the players that otherwise could have come to Australia, left in America. Now what happens to the Australian Golf Tour in the wake of this development?
It's a really good question, and you're quite right. It had been cannibalised for some time. COVID certainly didn't help that because no one could travel, but at the end of it, Australian golf was literally on its knees. They were coming up with all sorts of schemes just to stay current in the summer. Now, LIV Golf came to Adelaide, and we saw the reaction.
The scenes there are astonishing, weren't they? Bring the right golfers, bring the right act, and guess what? The people go off.
100%. And LIV absolutely showed what happens when you can bring it down to a golf-starved country like Australia, who provides so much talent to these tours, yet seemingly aren't rewarded for that. Let's hope that they are still a big part of this deal. But it takes some strong leadership on the Australian PGA side of things to ensure that that does happen.
Jim Callanan, thank you so much for that.